Suffolk, isn't it?
Correct.
But we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that when
we'll deal with this podcast. So the Billy Jasper podcast, and get all of that out of the way. So I think the first thing to say is Sean Atwood, the podcast with Sean Atwood, was quite frustrating and annoying. Atwood allowed Jasper to say things that were blatantly untrue and highly defamatory, and just to deal with those, the things that Jasper was saying were absolutely untrue, and if he wasn't a criminal and he had some money, we'd be suing his backside, and also Mr. Atwood, and may still do so. But Billy Jasper. So I think we've gone into some of Billy Jasper, and a lot of Billy Jasper stuff, all the interviews are online, but just to sort of quickly summarise Billy Jasper. So William George Jasper was a significant criminal. He'd been involved in shooting people, he'd been involved in robberies, a very violent individual, very importantly linked to West Ham football violence, the ICF. He very close to a lot of people around this case from Canning Town. He'd actually also been shot himself, which he describes in the podcast. So quite a significant player. There's a bit of confusion about when he actually got shot.
Yeah, I've dug into that since, and it's quite simple. That we both thought that, and we can name Can because it's in the public domain, is that Can had shot him because of what he said in his signed 12-page document. That cannot be the case, because he was shot before the Nick Whiting murder. And he was shot around the time of when he was charged with the shooting down in Hastings, where the judo man, I forget his name, Gould, I think Mick Gould, was shot in his house, a bungalow, and Jasper was one of his tenants, and he was charged and he got off. And it was around that time. So why he was shot 4 times is before the Nick Whiting murder, but it's got to be something to do with his criminality, obviously, because no one shoots somebody 4 times and not mean to. So we got that wrong. We'll put our hands up to it, we accept that, but it doesn't change anything. The issue is that Jasper voluntary asked to see a certain officer, voluntary signed, and it is his handwriting. We can prove that. We can show it on the screens now if we want to, but I know that is his handwriting. And also he was interviewed, and you can tell that's his voice, and he called to the bailey to give his evidence. Clearly the jury didn't believe him, but his evidence was bad. I think the judge carefully said hearsay is the word used, and that didn't work for him. So in relation to the Jasper account, what he says should have been investigated by Essex Police, rather than just kick him out the door, totally ignore it, don't even show it in the intelligence system, and the SI doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't know him. So you've used the word compelling, David, and I've been slightly more cautious. I think we both agree that we needed to see him. We tried to speak to him when he got released from prison in 2023, and members of his adopted family were concerned about his safety, and we helped and found him, and I think he went back into prison for a short period. So he came out over a year ago, and he's been out over a year ago. The question for me is, why suddenly has he gone on YouTube and said these total lies about me, and then denying you and me total lies about where we're coming from? One, we don't get paid, David. You haven't paid me a penny.
No.
If I put my exes into you, you'd be skin mate. So in relation to his account and what happened with him recently, is that either somebody out of Canning Town's got him, We know somebody else may have got at him just because of what's happening next month, because I've always said ignore, and I will continue to say ignore. So when you look at it, the bottom line is, we both know he wasn't telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but he was damn sight closer to a motive and those responsible, in our professional opinion, than Nichols' account. So, Mr. Jasper, if you want to sit round the table with us, we are very happy to sit round the table. And by the way, I'm not corrupt. I didn't know half the people you're talking to. I've never met, didn't know who was of Paul Betts, didn't even know him. He was a community officer at Romford, I believe. You know him, I don't. I've never met him in my life. Yeah. But anyway, park all that. You've got a bit of sympathy for him because, you know, he's spent just as long in prison as stealing moves.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Anyway, I've said enough. Yeah. David.
So just sort of dealing with the Billy Jasper account.
Yeah.
Categorically, the 12-page statement was written by him. The interviews are with him. Yeah. And without going through all that, because you can find it online, you can go through it online, you can listen to them all. The reality of that is there's stuff that Jasper says that just can't be explained. One of the most important points to make is that, we'll start at the beginning, he gets arrested at Forest Gate Police Station for a completely separate matter in January 1996. So he's not getting arrested for anything to do with the Rettendon murders, absolutely nothing. He gets taken to Forest Gate Police Station. He asks to speak to Rowley Baker. Rowley Baker, who is his handler, is not available, and he ends up speaking to a DC in the backyard, who we've spoken to at length, who takes him for a fag, which is what used to happen in the backyard, and immediately Jasper downloads that he's going to be murdered because of his involvement in what was the murders of Tucker Tate and Roll. Yeah. So, and that was detailed. That's exactly the same detail that he then went on to tell Essex Police in an interview.
And give it the Bailey.
And gave it the Bailey. And if I just finish this, this is important. He wasn't going there about Rettendon, he went there about something else, right? So, how is it that he's got all of that knowledge and information? He didn't, we keep hearing there's lots of discussion online, social media, and that, that perhaps he made it up. He couldn't have made it up. He told, the first officer he told immediately, Gareth, was, this is what happened, my life's at risk. He then went on to expand on it, but the reality is that he couldn't have made it up.
No.
You can't make that up, it's impossible.
And his motivation, just to clarify that point, on the day that he was arrested, he was a frightened man.
Yeah.
For all this violence and thuggery he's involved with, he was scared.
Yeah.
So the motivator for that, then when you get to the Atwood podcast, oh no, I was being clever and I did it to help Mick and Jack, who they don't even know, undermine the prosecution case and all this nonsense, which wasn't how it worked. No. The bottom line is, he was frightened for his life, rolled over, gave the police something interesting to talk about, and that's where we're at. Yeah. That's the motivation.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with undermining.
And you got then, he opens up to Gareth, tells him in the backyard. Gareth then goes and contacts Essex Murder Squad. You've got a DS and a PC come down, which, and I need to say this at this point, we've tried to speak to both of them, and particularly the DS clammed up, won't talk to us at all. And he's important because he also, that DS and PC are involved in other things that are quite significant around also finding the bullet, allegedly finding the bullet with a particular individual, and other things. And so they hold key information that in the event that this ever goes to court of appeal, they need to get in that witness box and they need to be asked questions, direct questions. But he goes to Essex, he does his 12-page statement, he does his interviews. One of the biggest points that comes out of it is he describes the clothing worn by the man he calls D, and he describes him as wearing tracksuit trainers. Trainers being quite important because the one thing that is found at the scene of the murders is a trainer print, and he gets the actual make of the trainers wrong. I can't remember which way round it is.
No, he says Reebok, and they're actually high-tech.
But when you look at the style of trainers, the actual sole prints are very similar.
Correct.
But, bear in mind, this was snow on the ground, Windsor, if you're going to make this story up, you don't put someone in tracksuit and trainers.
No.
Yeah. And also he's quite detailed about the route, how he gets there, and everything else. And we've been there. Where he describes, and we followed his description. We drove by it twice, didn't we? All this rubbish about, his mum lived at Rettendon, or near Rettendon railway station.
Yeah,
there is no
Rettendon.
There is no Rettendon. He might have got that right. It might be Battlesbridge.
Yeah, listen, that could easily be Battlesbridge, so let's not make a point of that.
But
there's a railway station there.
There is a railway station. But the fact is that the, Rectory Lane, where you turn left, or whichever way you're coming from, isn't easy to find. No. You wouldn't know about it. We've spoken to one of the team who had worked that area for years. When we took him there, didn't he? I didn't even know this existed. So that, what he said to Jasper in that podcast about Rectory Lane, utter rubbish. And the point here is, we think that Essex Police, the DS and the PC, discounted what he said simply because he didn't take him to Workhouse Lane. He didn't take him. When you read the detail of the interviews and the notebooks made by the DS and the PC, they just can't get their heads around the fact that he's taken them to the wrong location. And that's, I think, why it's completely discounted, that his version's discounted. Never looked at again. They do submit the fingerprints, I think, to the lab, but we've never
submit the detail of the people he names to the fingerprint branch, but we haven't seen the result.
No, we've never seen the result. That doesn't exist. And as we know, there's decision log entries that are signed off by Dibley, saying that releasing back to the Met.
3 different accounts, and it didn't fit with the current intelligence and direction of the inquiry. Well, they're only 4 weeks into it, so what was the current intelligence? Making the pilot.
Making the pilot, yeah. But they discounted. And that's the point. The point is they could have done so much more at that time. They could have looked at the reality of this is, and I think I've said this before on other podcasts. Right, Billy Jasper was a prolific informant. I had actually done work when I was on the Serious and Organised at Harbour Square.
He won't like you saying that, by the way.
Well, he may not like it, but he's said enough things about
me.
We
want to get the truth, don't we?
But the reality is that he was a trusted informant. Roddy Baker was his handler, and if someone from Essex, at the time he was in custody, picked up the phone and rang the Met and said, "We've got this man in custody, this is his name, this is who he's talking about." Number one, SO10, who handled the informants, would have got hold of Roddy Baker immediately, and there would be some discussion about that straight away, particularly because what he's talking about is a series of murders, not just the murder of the Rettendon murders, but the murder of Nick Whiting, another unsolved murder. So that would have raised flags, but the fireworks would have gone off because of the motive that he was putting forward. Patsy Clark, right? Patsy Clark, Brinks Matt.
Yeah.
There was the biggest inquiry team in the history of policing working on Brinks Matt. And if they'd have started mentioning, or someone from Essex had phoned up and said to the Met, this bloke's talking about Patsy Clark, talking about money, this, that, the robbery, Hainault robbery, fireworks would have gone off.
Yeah.
Fireworks would have gone off. And you'd have had the flying squad come down, you'd have had the Brinks Matt team come down to talk to Billy Jasper, because it was an opportunity but they couldn't have found.
No, and that's the problem, isn't it? There's no, from what we have seen, and I have to be cautious here, there is no evidence of any due diligence that was done around him. So the old adage in intelligence circles is know the enemy. So if I go to you, and I did as a governor, and I said, "Boss, this is what I've got to talk," you say, "Who am I dealing with? What's he all about? Who's he flagged to?" And he would have been flagged all over the place, all over the place on the system.
Yeah.
And as soon as you know that, you're getting excited, aren't you? Because immediately he's put you in the garden of people who are serious criminals and who are capable of saying, "Right, get rid of them, they're getting..." And it starts to make sense, right?
Some of the biggest criminals in the UK.
Correct.
He's talking about some of the biggest criminals in the UK.
Proper names, yeah.
And people who actually have the capacity, ability to carry out those murders.
Yes.
And to cover them up.
Yeah.
They've got corrupt policemen all around them. So, and there's another major factor here is, when you look at that last visit, they take him out again to the lane because they're clearly thinking, we need to make sure about this. And they take him back to the lane again, to Rectory Lane. And again, are you sure this is the lane? That's what they're saying to him. Are you sure this is the lane? And yeah, don't you believe me? But they clearly haven't got it in their heads that it is literally a walk across fields to the murder scene of Workhouse Lane. But he turns around at that point, I can't remember the exact words, but he effectively says, I actually knew they were going to be murdered. Which you would, at that point, you would have gone out, mate, well, I'm sorry, but you're nicked.
Yeah.
And he'd been nicked for the conspiracy murder. Yeah. They let him go. They didn't let him go, they sent him back to the Met, and he went to prison for other matters. But they ignored, that is incompetence on a scale you won't believe. Or was it worse than that? Did they go back to whoever, George Florence? Well, we know that Dibley, because he's spoken to Panorama, and he's spoken to Sky. We know that Dibley said he's never heard of Billy Jasper. Never heard of Billy Jasper. Never heard of his account. Likewise, I've spoken to the DI before she passed away, and again she says she's the one who actually makes the entries, and she says never heard of him. Every single Essex officer that we've spoken to on this case, and 20 plus, have never heard of Billy Jasper. And yet here he was in January 1996 admitting his role and involvement in the murders of Tucker Tate and Rolfe.
That's why it should have had a progress review. Next.
So dealing with Billy Jasper, where we are with Billy is, if he wants to come and talk to us, happy days. Yeah. The reality of this is, if this goes back to the Court of Appeal, if it does get overturned into miscarriage of justice, then you would expect someone to go and knock on Billy Jasper's door and ask him some questions.
But the actual Atwood interview was awful. It wasn't an interview. There was no open questions. There was no probing. He was allowing the interviewee Jasper to drink bottles of alcohol throughout the interview, not just one bottle.
Yeah.
It was just rubbish.
Yeah.
But at least what's come out of it is he's alive. Yeah, he's given an account. Listen, he's like David Colston, isn't he? When you look at David Colston, he told Customs and Norfolk Police in the shed, the intelligence shed, the 5x5, that he was wrapped round and was at a meet for the contract. We've interviewed him, and then 2 days later, the person we're not going to name interviews him, and it's a completely different story. Yeah. So they're trying to set us up. Well, they set us up for doing what? We haven't done it.
Yeah.
So in relation to what happened to David Colston, exactly the same has happened to Billy Jasper.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, because my recommendation number 2, David, is to deal with the person who in my view was a suspect in the early days and have him in and sort out what's the truth and what's not the truth.
But above and beyond all that, the problem we've got, and they're absolutely right, there is someone above all this pulling strings, which we think we know.
Yeah.
But strings are being pulled here, and these people are reacting to their strings being pulled, without a doubt.
And the reality is, and we've raised it with Essex Police. One of the points we've written to Essex Police repeatedly, and we've emailed quite a senior officer, never got to speak to the Chief Constable. We've offered to come and meet with the Chief Constable repeatedly, and we've said it has to be the Chief Constable in person because of the corruption around this case, not just the corruption back then, but the corruption now. The reality is we know that very senior, at least one very senior person within Essex Police has been going around telling officers who were on the original murder investigation on the drug squad, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Do not talk.
Yeah. And the shame is, with regard to the Chief Constable, he is, from my knowledge of him, and I knew him, a very nice guy.
Yeah.
A very decent bloke, a capable guy.
Yeah.
And someone that I would love to spend time with again, talking about this.
Because your expectation would be, all he has to do is turn around and say, come in for a couple of hours, I'll give you a couple of hours of my time,
cup of tea and a chat.
I'll listen to what you've got to say. He doesn't have to tell us anything,
no.
But at least if he sat there and listened to what we've got to say, I think you'd come away thinking, oh bloody hell, there's a balls up here. And more worrying than that is that he's got potentially someone internally who is frustrating and undermining
Exactly.
truth and justice.
Exactly.
And we know, because of other cases, historic cases in Essex, there is a current theme that runs through all of these, where there have been cover-ups continuously throughout a period of time. And until such time as that individual goes, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. When that individual does go, I think the poison will pour out, if and providing that none of that material has been destroyed. And that's the biggest worry for us, isn't it? That material gets destroyed.
Yeah. I think we've killed Billy Jasper, but not.
Hopefully we haven't.
I know.
Hopefully not.
No, I don't want that to happen.
No, far from it. Definitely don't want that to happen, because I think he holds the keys to the truth about what really did happen on the 7th of December 1995.
Correct.
I'm just going to quickly cover this, because it was covered by Billy Jasper, which is the murder of Nick Whiting. And again, we have written to both the Chief Constable of Essex and the Chief Constable of Kent about the unsolved murder of Nick Whiting.
Yeah.
And I have very recently spoken to the family, who we were trying to get hold of for years, and only recently, as a result of that podcast, did they come forward. But it's important, because the murder of Nick Whiting is an unsolved murder, and the material that Billy Jasper puts forward is corroborated, absolutely corroborated. We've spoken to the Deputy SIO, or the SIO you spoke to, didn't you? Was it the SIO or Deputy SIO?
No, let's start at the beginning with what Billy Jasper says. He names 2 people in his 12-page document that were wrapped round the Nick Whiting murder, and the 2 people, we can name one, but the other one I'm not going to name, but he's Mr. T, and the first one was Patsy Clark. So those 2 names are also mentioned and named by him in the Rettendon murders. He names those 2, but when you dig into the investigation, you find out that there were arrests, but they weren't convicted. They were charged with murder. 2 people were charged, but they weren't sent to trial.
No,
it was an old-style committal.
It was an old-style committal.
It was an old-style committal. So in relation to what Jasper says, he names 2 people, and they are, and he also names in Rettendon. And when I went and spoke to the officer in the case, the deputy I worked with on the Damon case, David Stevens, he says the boss at the time, I think, was Whiteley.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure if he's passed away. So Chalkley. Chalkley. That's it. So the ins and outs of it, we haven't dug deep enough, but you have probably dug a bit more than I have on that, David. But all it says is that it was an IOU in Nick Whiting's case, and you also named the drinks map, for want of a better word.
I think it's we know now from the family that there was an IOU in Nick Whiting's case. I think it was for £25,000 from Kenneth Neuer. Whiting's family will say that actually the money was paid to Brenda, who was at the time the wife of Kenny Neuer. And what we do know now, which is new, this is only within the last couple of weeks, we do know that Patsy Clark, we're told, was in prison at the time, needed funds, and that that particular person who's named by Jasper went to visit him the day before. That's confirmed by the police. The day before, Mick Chalkley confirmed that to the family. The day before the kidnapping, or the offence, the burglary, the kidnapping of Whiting, went to see Patsy Clark in prison. And Neuer had been involved in speaking to Whiting the day before that. So in the days leading up to the kidnap of Nick Whiting, there was activity that corroborates now what Billy Jasper said.
So the bottom line is, what Jasper said about the Rettendon is confirmed also what he said about the Whiting murder.
Absolutely.
That's our point.
Absolutely.
Is that so? What he says in his 12-page document is stacking up.
Exactly, and that's the point.
That's it.
And then you go a bit further. Is again, you spoke to, I can't remember his name now, but you spoke to DS, who was on the murder squad as well, and he confirmed also the evidence of Jasper around the Nick Whiting murder. And more importantly, and I think I covered this before in that podcast I did after with Jasper, is there was a Met Police SO11 surveillance team that night outside the British Flag Public House, not in anything to do with this. They were looking at someone completely different, and they saw one of the stolen cars turn up, driven by that individual, and so that confirms that he was there. And
well, he pleaded guilty, so we can name him.
Yeah, Robert Carr.
Yeah.
Confirms that he was there in a stolen car, and we know obviously from what Billy Jasper says that, according to Billy Jasper, they came out and they saw either the lifeless or still alive body of Nick Whiting, and I would think he was actually still alive in the boot of the car. And we've also got a second person who was fed to us through Les Balkwell, who unfortunately now deceased. He also was in the British Flag Public House at that time, and also corroborates. So all of that's corroborated, and obviously the other one that we've never disclosed before, and came out recently, was Albert Redding. Albert Redding was again very prolific senior informant for Mick Randall, and he contacted Mick Randall very soon after the burglary to tell him that those people had kidnapped someone and had either murdered or intended to murder that individual. Obviously Nick Whiting was taken to Raynham Marshes.
Where you found him?
Where I found him. He was tortured and he was shot and stabbed. So where we started with this is Essex and Kent Police need to come and talk to us, because Nick Whiting's murder remains unsolved, and is a very solvable murder. There is forensic. I do know that there were forensics found at that murder, including fingerprints and all sorts of other material. And with advances in DNA, you could solve that murder. I believe the murder of Nick Whiting could be solved. So that's sort of dealing with that. But what we're saying is, what Jasper says about Nick Whiting goes to confirm that what he said at the time of his interview and in his 12-page statement was true, and he's likely true in what he said.
It gives credibility.
Gives credibility, yeah. So that's the murder of Nick Whiting. I think we need to just cover off with Jasper as well. The last thing is, without going into loads of detail, following the Sky documentary, I can't remember how long after, several months after, I got an email followed by a phone call, and I've had numerous online calls and conversations with this particular person, who came forward and said, I can't go into too much detail because it will be disclosed, but effectively puts Billy Gale was very close to the wine bar that night, that he was dropped off, and that he turned up at an address with a significant amount of cocaine, and subsequently admitted his involvement in the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, both the day after, so the 7th of December 1995, and subsequently. So again, that is corroborating material that supports what Jasper, or the Jasper account, the Jasper evidence. We also have another witness who came forward, and again I can't give too much detail, that she says that two other men, who she names but I'm not going to name, went out on the 6th of December 1995 and came back the following day with a pump-action shotgun covered in blood and a significant amount of cocaine, which was hidden in a kitchen at an address in Canning Town. So we're not saying it is linked, but those people were part of that Canning Town organised crime group. So that's quite important. So putting it all together, what we're saying is that Jasper account is more likely and closer to the truth.